My name is Jordan, and I'm 24 years old. I should have been celebrating my college graduation with my family last month. But instead I found myself sitting in complete silence at what used to be our loud, chaotic dinner table. Something inside me finally broke after years of pretending to be someone I wasn't. Growing up in suburban Ohio, our family dinners were legendary. Mom would cook for an army, Dad would tell his work stories, my younger sister Emma would complain about her teachers, and I would sit there, nodding and smiling, playing the role of the perfect eldest child. But there was always this weight in my chest, this secret I carried that made every laugh feel forced, every hug feel hollow. For 24 years, I perfected the art of deflection. When relatives asked about girlfriends, I'd change the subject to school. When friends talked about dating, I'd make jokes about being too focused on my career. When my parents would hint about wanting grandchildren someday, I'd just smile and say someday. But someday felt like a lie I was telling myself as much as them. The breaking point came during what should have been a celebration. I had just landed my dream job at a marketing firm in Chicago, and Mom insisted on having the whole extended family over for dinner. Aunt Linda, Uncle Mike, my grandparents, my cousins, everyone was there. The table was set with the good china, the one we only used for special occasions. Mom had made my favorite lasagna, and Dad had opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving. As we sat around the table, Uncle Mike started his usual interrogation about my love life. So, Jordan, you must have met someone special in college, right? A handsome guy like you. The table went quiet, waiting for my response. I could feel my heart pounding, my palms getting sweaty. This was it. This was the moment I'd been dreading and craving in equal measure. Actually, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I'm gay. The silence that followed was deafening. Forks stopped midair, conversations died, and suddenly the only sound was the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I watched as my mom's face went pale, as my dad's jaw tightened, as Aunt Linda's eyes widened in what I could only describe as shock mixed with disappointment. The Hendersons were what you'd call a traditional American family. Dad worked at the local insurance company for 30 years. Mom stayed home until Emma and I were in high school, then took a part-time job at the library. We went to church every Sunday, attended every school function, and maintained the perfect facade of middle-class success. Our house was the gathering place for every holiday, every birthday, every celebration. Mom took pride in hosting, in making sure everyone felt welcome and fed. Dad was the quiet patriarch, the one who fixed things and provided stability. Emma was the artistic one, the free spirit who could get away with anything because she was the baby. And I was the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble, who always did what was expected. But beneath the surface, there were cracks. Dad's drinking had increased over the years, though no one talked about it. Mom's anxiety manifested in her need to control every detail of our lives. Emma rebelled in small ways, staying out late, dating boys our parents didn't approve of, choosing art over the practical career path they wanted for her. I, on the other hand, became the peacekeeper. I mediated between Emma and our parents. I covered for Dad when he'd had too much to drink at family gatherings. I helped Mom with her endless hosting duties. I became so good at managing everyone else's feelings that I forgot to acknowledge my own. The turning point in our family dynamic came when I was 16. My grandfather, Dad's father, passed away suddenly. It was the first real loss our family had experienced, and we had no idea how to handle it. Dad withdrew into himself, drinking more and talking less. Mom threw herself into taking care of everyone else, refusing to acknowledge her own grief. Emma acted out more, desperate for attention that our parents couldn't give. I remember the funeral, how everyone kept telling me I needed to be strong for the family, how I was the man of the house now while Dad grieved. I was 16 years old, struggling with my own identity and sexuality, and suddenly I was responsible for holding everyone together. That's when I learned that my feelings, my struggles, my truth, none of it mattered as much as maintaining the family peace. The pattern started small. Family dinners became performances where I played the role of the perfect son. I'd talk about school, about my plans for college, about anything except the thoughts that kept me awake at night. When relatives would ask about girls, I'd deflect with humor or change the subject. When friends would talk about their crushes, I'd listen and nod, contributing just enough to seem normal. By the time I got to college, the pretending had become second nature. I dated a few girls, nice ones who deserved better than someone who was lying to himself and to them. I told myself it was just a phase, that I'd figure it out eventually. But the relationships always felt forced, like I was reading lines from a script I didn't write. The family gatherings became increasingly difficult. Aunt Linda would corner me about marriage, asking when I was going to settle down and give your mother some grandchildren. Uncle Mike would make jokes about my bachelor lifestyle, winking like we shared some secret about playing the field. My parents would smile and nod, clearly hoping that one day I'd bring home a nice girl and complete their picture of the perfect family. I started making excuses to miss gatherings. Work obligations, study groups, anything to avoid the questions and the expectations. But the absences only made the pressure worse. When I did show up, the focus on my love life became even more intense, as if my presence was a rare opportunity to extract information. The worst part was watching my parents' friends with their married children, seeing the pride in their eyes as they talked about weddings and grandchildren. I could see the longing in Mom's eyes, the way she'd linger on baby pictures, the way she'd hint about wanting to be a grandmother someday. I felt like I was failing them just by being who I was. What made it worse was that I was successful in every other way. I was on the dean's list, I had internships lined up, I was everything they wanted in a son except for this one thing. This one huge thing that I couldn't change, couldn't fix, couldn't make go away no matter how hard I tried. The graduation dinner was supposed to be perfect. Mom had spent weeks planning it, calling relatives, coordinating schedules, preparing a feast that could feed twice as many people as were coming. She'd made all my favorite foods, decorated the dining room with my school colors, and even had a cake made with my degree printed on it in frosting. But sitting at that table, surrounded by people who loved me but didn't really know me, I felt more alone than ever. Aunt Linda kept pushing about my future plans, specifically asking if I had anyone special to share my success with. Uncle Mike joked about how I must be breaking hearts in college. My grandmother, sweet as she was, kept asking when I was going to find a nice girl and settle down. Each question felt like a weight on my chest. Each expectation felt like a lie I was being forced to tell. I watched my parents' faces, saw the hope in their eyes every time someone brought up my love life, saw the way they'd lean in slightly, waiting for me to finally give them the answer they wanted to hear. The worst moment came when Aunt Linda pulled out her phone and started showing pictures of her neighbor's son's wedding. "Look at this beautiful ceremony," she said, passing the phone around the table. "You know, Jordan, you're at the perfect age to start thinking about marriage. Your parents have been so patient, waiting for you to find the right girl." I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked back at me, tired and hollow. I thought about my college friends who were living their truth, who were open about their relationships, who didn't have to perform every time they came home. I thought about the life I was building for myself in Chicago, the job I was excited about, the person I wanted to become. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on, but the tension remained. Every laugh felt forced, every smile felt fake. I watched my family enjoying their dinner, celebrating my success, and I realized that they were celebrating a version of me that didn't exist. They were proud of Jordan the straight son, Jordan the perfect child, Jordan the lie. After dinner, as everyone was saying their goodbyes, my mom pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you, honey," she said, tears in her eyes. "You've accomplished so much. I just know you're going to find someone wonderful to share your life with. Someone who deserves you." Her words, meant to be loving and supportive, felt like daggers. She didn't know that I'd already found someone. Well, I was starting to. There was David, a guy from my program who I'd been talking to more and more. But I couldn't tell her about him. I couldn't tell her that the someone I was falling for was nothing like what she imagined. The second dinner happened 3 weeks later. Mom had invited the family over again, this time to celebrate my new job. I almost didn't come. I sat in my car in their driveway for 15 minutes, debating whether to drive away. But I knew that missing another family gathering would only make things worse. The evening started the same way as always. Pleasant conversation, good food, and the inevitable questions about my personal life. But this time I was different. 3 weeks of living on my own, of being honest with myself about my feelings for David, of imagining a future where I didn't have to pretend. It had changed something fundamental in me. When Uncle Mike started his usual routine about my bachelor lifestyle, I didn't deflect. When Aunt Linda asked about girlfriends, I didn't change the subject. I just sat there, feeling the weight of 24 years of lies pressing down on me. The moment came when my grandmother, bless her heart, said, "Jordan, sweetheart, you know we just want you to be happy. Have you met any nice girls at that new job of yours?" I looked around the table at these people who loved me, who had supported me, who had celebrated every achievement and milestone in my life. I thought about David, about the way he made me laugh, about the conversations we'd had about our futures. I thought about the life I wanted to build, the person I wanted to be. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need to tell you all something. I'm gay. The silence was immediate and complete. It was as if someone had pressed a mute button on the entire room. Forks stopped midair, conversations died, and suddenly the only sound was my heart pounding in my ears. I watched my parents' faces change. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of sadness or shock. Dad's expression was unreadable, his jaw tight, his hands gripping his napkin. Emma looked at me with something that might have been pride, or maybe just surprise. But it was Aunt Linda who broke the silence. She set down her fork with a deliberate clink and looked directly at me. "Well," she said, her voice cold and measured, "you certainly know how to make a dinner awkward." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because they were so perfectly calculated to make me feel responsible for everyone else's discomfort. Not "we need time to process this," or "we love you no matter what," or even "we're surprised." Just blame, pure and simple. "I made this awkward?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "I made this awkward by telling you the truth about who I am." "You made this awkward by bringing up your personal business at a family dinner," she replied, her tone making it clear that she thought the matter was settled. "We were having a nice time, and you decided to make it about you." The argument that followed was unlike anything our family had ever experienced. Voices were raised, accusations were thrown, and 24 years of carefully maintained family peace exploded in one evening. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. "You want to know what's awkward?" I said, my voice carrying through the dining room. "What's awkward is pretending to be someone you're not for 24 years. What's awkward is lying to the people you love because you're afraid they won't love you back." My mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jordan, maybe we should talk about this privately." "No," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "I'm done with private conversations. I'm done with deflecting and hiding and pretending. This is who I am. I'm gay. I'm dating someone and his name is David, and I'm happier than I've been in years." The silence that followed was different from the first one. This one was charged with emotion, with the weight of truth finally spoken. I could see my family processing, trying to reconcile the Jordan they thought they knew with the Jordan standing in front of them. Uncle Mike cleared his throat. "Well, this is unexpected." "Is it?" I asked. "Really? Because I've been carrying this secret for years, and it's been eating me alive. I've missed out on relationships, on honesty, on being myself because I was so afraid of disappointing all of you." My father finally spoke, his voice gruff with emotion. "We never asked you to lie to us." "You didn't have to ask," I replied. "The expectations were clear. The perfect son, the perfect life, the perfect future. And I tried to give you that, but I can't anymore. I won't anymore." That night, I left my parents' house for the first time in my life without saying goodbye to everyone. I hugged Emma, who whispered, "I'm proud of you," in my ear. I kissed my grandmother on the cheek, unsure of what she was thinking but grateful that she didn't pull away. I nodded to my parents, who were still sitting at the table, looking stunned. But I didn't say goodbye to Aunt Linda or Uncle Mike. I didn't try to smooth things over or make them feel better about their discomfort. For the first time in my life, I prioritized my own feelings over everyone else's comfort. The weeks that followed were difficult. My parents called several times, conversations that were stilted and careful, dancing around the elephant in the room. Emma texted me daily, checking in, making sure I was okay. My grandmother sent me a card with a simple message. "I love you, Jordan." That will never change. But Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike didn't reach out. Not immediately, anyway. The real change came a month later, at my cousin's birthday party. I almost didn't go, but Emma convinced me that hiding wasn't the answer. "You told your truth," she said. "Now let them figure out how to handle it." When I walked into my aunt and uncle's house, the atmosphere was different. Some relatives greeted me normally, others were more reserved. But the biggest change was in how I carried myself. I wasn't performing anymore. I wasn't the perfect son putting on a show. I was just Jordan, take it or leave it. The conversation naturally turned to my new job, my life in Chicago, my plans for the future. When someone asked about my social life, I didn't deflect. "I'm seeing someone," I said simply. "His name is David and he's great." The reaction was mixed. Some relatives smiled and asked questions. Others looked uncomfortable but tried to be polite. Aunt Linda, to her credit, didn't make any snide comments. She simply nodded and changed the subject. But the most important change was in my parents. Over the following months, they began to ask questions. Real questions. About my life, about David, about what being gay meant for my future. They weren't perfect. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, and times when their discomfort was obvious. But they were trying. The breakthrough came when my mother called me one evening, 6 months after that fateful dinner. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice uncertain. "About pretending to be someone you're not. And I realized that we created an environment where you felt you had to do that. I'm sorry. It wasn't a complete transformation. Change rarely is. But it was a beginning. A recognition that love means accepting someone as they are, not as you want them to be." Today, 2 years later, our family dinners are different. They're smaller sometimes. Not everyone comes to every gathering. But they're more honest. More real. The conversations are deeper, the laughter is genuine, and the love, while sometimes complicated, is true. David comes to dinner now. Not every time, and not without some lingering awkwardness from certain relatives, but he's part of the family. He helps my mother in the kitchen, discusses sports with my father, and treats everyone with the same kindness and respect he shows me. Aunt Linda and I have found a new equilibrium. She doesn't ask about my love life anymore, and I don't expect her to. We're polite, we're family, but we're also honest about our boundaries. Sometimes that's enough. The lesson I've learned is that authenticity isn't just about being true to yourself. It's about giving the people you love the chance to love the real you. Some of them will rise to the occasion. Others might not. But the alternative, living a lie to protect everyone else's comfort, isn't really living at all. If you're sitting at your own family dinner table, carrying your own secret, wondering if the people you love will still love you when they know who you really are, I want you to know that the fear is real, but so is the possibility of acceptance. So is the possibility of deeper, more authentic relationships. So is the possibility of finally exhaling after years of holding your breath. The silence that followed my coming out was deafening. But the conversation that followed, difficult as it was the most important one of my life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to make other people's discomfort your responsibility. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply tell the truth. Your truth is worth telling. You are worth loving. And the people who truly love you will find a way to love all of you, even if it takes time, even if it's messy, even if it changes everything.